Joey Caraut died from stab wounds. His girlfriend, Samantha Krebs, was there. She's been charged with doing it, but she claims her innocence and explained to the jury that Joey threw the knife sheath, and when she turned around, he was bleeding. Samantha did not call 911. Instead, she kissed him and left. Was this murder or suicide? Tonight, all the evidence is in and the arguments have been made, and it's time to hear from the jury. But first, the campus of Utah Valley University was torn apart by the sound of gunfire, and in that tragic instant, a leader, husband, father, was struck down. Charlie Kirk, known for his fiery debates and unyielding commitment to faith and country, had become a beacon for countless young conservative Americans searching for direction in a divided world. To his family, he was a loving presence, a steady hand, a man who lived his beliefs not just on stage, but at home. Now, his murder has become a manhunt for this suspect, whose image was captured on surveillance video. Tonight, we have all the latest in this investigation as everyone wonders, who is this alleged killer and why did he do it? I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Charlie Kirk was silenced by a bullet. This is a young man who built a career both on social media and around college campuses across the nation, talking about his ideas and debating his ideas with others who disagreed with him. It was part of his mission. It was what his career was built on, which was trying to convince others about his beliefs that he believed. And it's gone now. It's silenced by a bullet. That is something that runs so counter to what is so fundamental in this country, which is the freedom to exchange ideas. As a matter of fact, today, the FBI said this was an attack on the First Amendment. And it really is. If you're trying to silence someone's speech through violence, that is an attack. It absolutely is. You know, when this country was founded, the First Amendment was first for a reason, because it's so important to have those conversations, to have those debates. And it's actually healthy when the whole country doesn't agree on everything, when our lawmakers don't all agree on everything. That's healthy. That is important. That is foundational to this nation. And to try to silence someone through violence is, in fact, an attack on the First Amendment. And that happened yesterday. And today, 9/11, is a day where we remember another attack on our freedom. And that day was, you know, some may have been too young, but those who weren't, I'm sure, have that image burnt into their minds about where they were, what they were doing, what they were thinking in the moments after the attack on the World Trade Center, and then on the Pentagon, and the plane that went down in Pennsylvania as well. And the reaction to that is what sticks with me. I was on the road. I was in Texas when it happened, and then went to Cincinnati afterwards, staying in a hotel with strangers. But in the aftermath of all that, we weren't strangers, because we had a common bond as Americans. And we were all feeling the same thing, wondering what's going to happen next. And it's us, like we are one. Like, we may not view the world the same, we may not have the same religion, the same political affiliation, but we have that common bond, which is we're Americans. And I felt it in the aftermath of that, and not just that day, but in the days, weeks, and months, and I think even a few years afterwards, that feeling permeated us. And now we're in a place where we are divided politically, and you bring it back to what happened to Charlie Kirk. Obviously, it's connected somehow to someone who did not agree with his thoughts. And that divide now turning into violence, when we should be in a place where we never forget that feeling that we had, where we never forget that in the end, we are all Americans. We all want a better country. We just may not agree on how it should be done, but that is something that is debated. That is not something that is solved or resolved through violence. Now, let's get to the manhunt that is continuing tonight. I want you to take a listen. This is Bo Mason, Commissioner of the Utah Department of Public Safety, providing some insight and some details into this investigation for the person who is responsible for shooting and killing Charlie Kirk. Take a listen.
We were able to track the movements of the shooter. Starting at 11:52 a.m., this subject arrived on campus, shortly away from campus. We have tracked his movements onto the campus, through the stairwells, up to the roof, across the roof to a shooting location. After the shooting, we were able to track his movements as he moved to the other side of the building, jumped off of the building, and fled off of the campus and into a neighborhood. Our investigators have worked through those neighborhoods, contacting anybody they can with doorbell cameras, witnesses, and have thoroughly worked through those communities, trying to identify any leads. We do have good video footage of this individual. We are not going to release that at this time. We are working through some technologies and some ways to identify this individual. If we are unsuccessful, we will reach out to you as the media and we will push that publicly to help us identify them. But we are confident in our abilities right now, and we would like to move forward in a manner that keeps everyone safe and moves this process appropriately.
So the suspect has not been named. We now have those images, though, from the video. They're not 100% clear, these images. There may be other video they have that is much clearer, but what they have released so far gives us some idea. And I think anyone that was there or was taking video would take a look at that snapshot that they have and say, oh, okay, I have recordings of this person, you know, in another place, and trying to provide that information to help in all of this. But exactly where are we in this investigation? Let's get some help from a couple guests who know a whole lot. I'm joined by Utah retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King, and Utah private investigator, Jason Jensen. Thank you both for being here. Mike King, your first reaction, let's talk about the manhunt, right? The search for this accused killer. We've got this image. What do you think's going on in trying to track down the person depicted in this image? If they have this and they have other video, what can they do?
Well, Vinny, I would suspect that if law enforcement takes the position that the commissioner just did in that clip that you played, that they have what they need to move forward at this point, that they may have even identified who this individual is, and at this point they're trying to look at locations where they might go, people they might associate with. They're trying to tighten up that net so that they can take this person into custody. The interesting thing will be what they recover from the forensics off of the weapon. And frankly, if they do know who it is, what they learn about the person's background. And so that gives them a much better idea of what they're up against. So this is a dragnet in progress. We're having the opportunity of kind of trusting that it's happening because thankfully law enforcement's keeping things a little close to the vest. But I think that we're going to see some action happening pretty quickly in this case.
I want to take a listen, Jason Jensen, some of the dispatch audio that happened, at the time of the shooting. Let's listen.
UVU by the Soundstand reported one individual that was shot, unknown where the shooter went. And let's be advised, UVU in Orem has had an active shooter at the Charlie Kirk event. We're getting several calls. We're trying to get more information. Gunshots heard near the library at UVU. They're trying to lock the library down now. Still gathering. The CS building is just east of the library. He's wearing jeans, black shirt, black mask, long rifle. Is on top of the building on the far north side, just east of the library, wearing jeans, black shirt, black vest.
For UVU.
There was one shot. We are staging at the front of the school by the roundabout.
We do have officers following the victim to Camden Rapids Hospital.
418 copy. How many injured do we have?
It's just one person.
One person, one shot. Jason, I also want to show you this. TMZ obtained video of the person of interest heading towards the campus. This is before Charlie Kirk was shot. In the video, the potential suspect appears to have somewhat of a limp. Now, we've heard a description of him jumping off the roof, but limping on his way there. I don't see a gun. My producer, Virginia, said, I wonder if that gun is down the pant leg, and that's how he's going to get to where he needs to get without anyone noticing he's got a gun. What are your thoughts, Jason? I don't hear Jason. Jason is frozen. Mike King, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, Vinny, a couple of things come to mind. Number one, that's a possibility, and we have to think about that. But I also think there's been some information that's trickled out that there was a small screwdriver recovered at the site where the sniper was shooting from. And that gives me an indication that perhaps that was an assembled rifle on the rooftop, and that certainly could fit in that backpack and be put together. And maybe like a Brian Kohlberger knife, this could be the thing that leaves a piece of evidence that might help tie this thing together. But boy, all those things are possibilities. It's also possible that that weapon could have been staged there long before he walked into that scene, that he used the cover of night to come in and get ready for this, because everything appears to be that there's pre-planning, there's organization, and that might fall apart a little bit toward the end, but this thing was executed pretty well.
Yeah, that's so let's talk about that. If in fact the weapon was pre-staged or in the backpack, not down his pant leg, and he's got a gimp and a limp like that, that seems like that should be someone, you know, anyone would be able to notice. And if you know the person, you're going to know, oh my goodness, that's so-and-so, because I know, I can tell by the walk.
Absolutely. And isn't it interesting, because once an image is put out, names start flooding into the police department about who that possibly could be. But in this particular case, we now have the FBI stepping up and putting a $100,000 reward out for information leading to this thing too. So I don't believe there's going to be a lot of friends that know this guy if he truly has a limp and looks like this guy, and this is the guy, that they're not going to be able to track him down pretty darn quickly.
Okay, let's take a look at some maps here so we get a better idea of the location of Charlie Kirk and the location of the shooter. As we take a look at this map, this is an overhead, and you can get the surrounding neighborhood, because it seems that he fled on foot from what we're hearing from investigators. So you see the rooftop of where the shooter was, and then where Charlie was. And we pull back, you can see the university kind of backs into a neighborhood, and we had reports of officers going door to door inside of this neighborhood. And we pull back even further, looking for potential escape routes and highways to get out of Dodge quickly. We can kind of see the lay of the land there. Mike, I know you've also taken a look at this. What are your thoughts about how far the shooter is, and what level of expertise or training would they need to be able to do this with one shot?
Well, clearly the individual is comfortable with a weapon. Now, the type of injury that appeared to be on Mr. Kirk is very indicative of a high-power weapon. So, I mean, we're moving into deer season in Utah, Vinny, so probably everybody in the north end of the state has been out sighting in their weapon. And frankly, originally there was some indication from the media and from the police that this was a 200-yard shot. When I started looking a little closer at that map, to me, it looks like about 421 feet to be pretty precise. And
here's
it's about
that map, Mike.
70-foot drop.
Here's the map that you put together.
There we go.
Explain what we're looking at.
Yeah, thanks, Vinny. And from our friends at Esri, thanks. I mean, this is the cool thing, because on the far right side, under the Court TV logo, is the location of the shooter. What we have on the far left side at the bottom is the location of Charlie Kirk at the time that he was shot. 418 and a half feet is that distance there, guessing where he truly was on the corner. But the line of sight is so narrow that he has to be more toward the south end of that building where he's shooting from in order to have vision into the location where Charlie Kirk was staged. And keep in mind, that's only 70 feet difference in that drop from where he is in his elevated position to Charlie Kirk down in that pit. And so we can see why he has such a good view. And frankly, it also gives us an indication that he's in an area where if he's trying to flee, he most likely would have to flee toward the east. And that little neighborhood, I believe that law enforcement's talking about, because the only neighborhood that's attached to that place, as we look here, that white dot kind of signifies where Charlie was standing. But as he would have left that rooftop, he would have headed straight east across the rooftop down, and then he would have dumped, and police said in the woods. Well, there aren't any woods there, but there are a batch of trees on the north side of the campus in that northeast corner, and we're starting to move toward that as the panning here is happening. The red point shows where the suspect potentially was. And then to the far east is a little thing called Aviation Park. But that neighborhood is just to the north of all of that. So it would have been really easy to get there. And it makes me think that that weapon was probably recovered in that thick stack of trees to the northeast of where that shooter started this rampage.
Jason Jensen is back with us. Jason, big picture, your thoughts tonight.
Well, I think eventually they're going to nail this guy. I mean, one of the things that doesn't get talked enough, but MVACing, I've seen experts MVAC DNA off of shells, let alone on such a large, rifle as what was used here. So I think they will get DNA.
So, in putting the pieces together, right? So you use the ballistics to identify the murder weapon, and then you connect the murder weapon to the shooter, and that can be done potentially through DNA, whether it's the weapon, the screwdriver, or anything else. I mean, the way the testing is these days, it's a lot different than it used to be. They'll likely also trace the weapon itself, right? If they can get a serial number, Jason?
Yes. Because it's a long rifle, it has to be purchased through a gun dealer in Utah. So certainly there would be a record of it being purchased. And like Mike was saying earlier, it's very important. This type of rifle, a Mauser, is really used for hunting. So it's not unlikely that type of a hit would be successful to a deer hunter.
Now, let me ask you this, Mike. Social media is such a big driver of theories, and people are jumping in. But this is one of those cases where you're trying to identify someone. And there's people being identified on the internet right now as we speak. Obviously, we're not going to, provide those names, but people are identifying people. Here's my question. Does law enforcement pay attention to any of that during the course of the investigation? Because what the internet does is it multiplies, right? You're not talking about one set of eyeballs. You're talking about millions of people rummaging through every record they can find online. And then they try to match up. Oh, this person is similar to this person. This person posted a song about Charlie Kirk dead at 31 back in August. They now scrubbed it. This is what's happening online right now. Does law enforcement pay attention to that?
Boy, they better be paying attention, Vinny. And I'll tell you, this is something that you and I have talked about on several occasions, and that's the fact that law enforcement has to figure out how to embrace the true crime community, because there are a batch of people out there with a whole lot of skill sets, and they're gathering a whole lot of information. And bottom line is, when the Boston Marathon happened, one of the failures was when they asked for tips and leads, they had so much information coming in, it was hard to manage. Delphi, Indiana, perfect example. They gave the public an assignment, and that's what law enforcement has to do in this particular case, and I think they've done it. We want information leading up to this. And boy, it should be a caution to everybody that's out on social media that there are people scrolling through their phone at 2 o'clock in the morning that just might be inspired by your words of hate or discontent, and they may turn into a terrorist.
Mike King, Jason Jensen, so glad to have you both here tonight. Thank you so much. When we come back, we'll bring in our think tank, weigh in on what happens in the pursuit of this suspect, what happens when this suspect gets caught. Plus, coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, Courtney Clenny made millions on social media, especially on OnlyFans. But what really happens on OnlyFans? Tonight, we investigate with two women from OnlyFans joining us live.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
A young mother found brutally murdered.
Now, the victim's boyfriend, a married father of four,
is charged for the murder of his alleged mistress and her unborn child.
The pregnant mistress murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
So it is scary to think of that this person came so close to us and to our neighbors.
The neighborhood just behind Utah Valley University is described as a generally quiet area. But Wednesday afternoon was anything but quiet.
The police were on this, and they were canvassing all afternoon into the evening. The local police, and I believe it was FBI also that was coming around. They were on it.
Kathy Beckel led us to her backyard. She says police searched this area for the suspected gunman and his weapon. Just a few streets over, Erwin Steele was another neighbor who was met with officers in his front yard.
It was scary. It's. I know it's been said many times, but this is a safe place. This is a calm place. We're right next to the largest university in the state, but at the same time, they're generally good people.
Steele says they're helping authorities by giving them any footage they have on their outdoor cameras. But he says it's still startling to know the gunman could have been so close to their homes.
We have students going up and down the street all day long, and it's never been a threat to our safety. And so for something like this to happen it's shocking. It's really shocking.
It's disturbing because you don't know if the person is still around. And this is a quiet neighborhood. It's a very quiet, very nice neighborhood. And so it's disturbing to have something like that come up. But, I mean, something could happen anywhere.
The manhunt continues. How did the shooter get away? Especially if the shooter had that gimp or limp. Like, how are they just disappearing? And now investigators still trying to get to the identity. And it makes you wonder, did the person have any help? Were they going to a place where they parked a car, where they were going to get picked up? Did they Uber? Who knows? Let's bring in our think tank. Joining us tonight, criminal defense attorney, legal analyst Carmen Rowe is with us. Also joining us, former federal prosecutor, president of the West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani, and attorney Ali Benevento. Thank you all for being here. Carmen, let me ask you, if someone else is involved here, someone who's helping with the getaway, if that's, someone was waiting by, could they be held responsible for what happened, the shooting of Charlie Kirk? Can they be reeled into all of that?
I think there's no question, Vinny, and make no mistake, if someone helped in the committing of this offense, either before, during, or after, be sure that they will be charged in this matter. I mean, we're looking at both federal and state prosecutions, and one way or another, I think they're going to wrap everyone who's involved up in this.
All right, Nima Rahmani, former federal prosecutor, tell me, how did the feds get jurisdiction for this murder? What is we know the FBI is working the case. Sometimes they work the case for the state. What are your thoughts here about how the feds could get jurisdiction over this?
Vinny, there's no question or doubt in my mind that this is going to be a federal case. When you have the president talking about it, the attorney general, FBI director, the feds are going to step in. And there's a few bases for federal jurisdiction. The probably easiest is the federal terrorism statute. If this was done because of the shooter's political belief or to influence the public some way politically, that's the easiest way. You could potentially get it there from a civil rights angle and argue that the murderer was trying to silence Kirk's political speech, infringe upon his First Amendment rights. That's a civil rights statute. Of course, if there's some other interstate commerce basis, if the killer traveled across state lines, he was stalking, that's another basis as well. But you're right, the limp is very interesting. Reminds me of The Usual Suspects, Kaiser Sose. I know Kobayashi is there in the car to pick him up, but very sort of fascinating component of this case.
All right, Allie, the governor of Utah has already spoken and reminded the public and reminded the killer that Utah has the death penalty. So I'm wondering if Utah wants this case. They've got the death penalty. They know how to prosecute a murder case. So if this suspect is apprehended, what are your thoughts about how this whole thing will go? Because if you're talking about civil rights violations next to a death penalty murder trial, big difference.
Absolutely. But I think there's no question that the death penalty will be pursued in this case, whether that is by the state of Utah or by the federal government. And whoever said it earlier was correct. The president is talking about this. Make no mistake. This administration has made its position very clear. Bring back the death penalty. Bring it back as often and as frequently as we can. And this case looks a lot, at least at these early stages, like the Luigi Mangione case, where we saw this Department of Justice come out very quickly and say, we're going to pursue the death penalty. Now, the difference here being it took place in a state that does impose the death penalty. So it'll be very interesting to watch the state prosecutors and the federal prosecutors decide who's going to run point in this case. But I think no question, death penalty case.
Now, Carmen, I don't think we're going to have a situation like we did in Idaho with that guy, the Idaho 4 killer, who was given a deal, committed mass murder and was given a deal. I don't think this suspect, if and when they're apprehended, is going to get a deal. They're going to take this thing to trial. So if they go to trial, what is the defense? It's got to be somebody else did it, or are they going to come up with some sort of diminished capacity? But I think Utah is a tough state for that.
Vinny, I have no idea where you even begin to come up with the defense when we have all this video, we have all these photos of this individual, as well as the thousands of people that were there that day. I don't see this going anywhere except a trial with a very creative or no defensive theory whatsoever. But it's a case that I think has to be tried because the people in Utah and across this country are going to want to see a trial and not a deal.
Yeah, and I think, Nima, it may be one of those cases, and we see these, right? If there's no viable defense, that the defense really focuses on trying to convince this jury that this person should not go to death row.
Absolutely. If you're a death penalty lawyer, your number one job is to keep your client alive. And it could be Brian Kohberger, it can be Nicholas Cruz, or any number of cases that we've covered here on Court TV. You might see a plea during the guilt phase and then just go to the penalty phase, and you start talking about mitigation because, again, I know a lot of folks were unhappy with Kohberger, but the defense did their job. They kept their client alive. I still think he did deserve the death penalty. If you do believe in the death penalty, it's one of the most heinous murders in state history. But that's going to be the goal in this case. Whoever gets assigned this case, because look, there's going to be a whole political layer on top of this. So there's not going to be any type of deal. And the reason the feds are going to step in, like Luigi Mangione, like DeCarlos Brown there in Charlotte, is because now you have elected officials. And when you have pressure like that, believe me, Vinny, this is going to be a federal case. Regardless of what the state does, it's going to be a death penalty case, and there's going to be absolutely no life deal given in this case.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a double dip, but I think Utah is going to hold on to him and try him first if, in fact, they track down this killer who was still wanted tonight. Great news, our think tank staying with us. When we come back, yeah, I've got a red tie. Picked this up at CrimeCon from great folks I met out there. The verdict is in the kiss and kill murder trial. We'll go through the verdict and the aftermath and what is next.
Hello. And
And I just remember John saying, "Is there drugs in the house?" And me having this realization, yes, there's drugs in the house. And he's like, "You need to get them out. You need to leave." And I just remember rushing as fast as I could into the bedroom and grabbing the drugs. And John was on his phone, John Pfeiffer. And I thought he was on the phone with the ambulance. And so I ran out of the house because he kept yelling at me, "You need to leave before we all get in trouble."
Your fiance, the person you're supposed to marry, who says you are the love of his life, is bleeding out and dying on the kitchen floor, and you leave.
I didn't know he was dying.
Oh, Samantha, you talked about him being unconscious and having blood gushing from his chest. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That was Samantha Krebs. Took the stand in her own defense, told her story. Said this was basically suicide. I didn't do it. I didn't stab him. I turned around, he's bleeding, and he's there by himself. Killed himself. But she left. Bad fact, right? Today, closing arguments and the verdict. Let's take you inside the courtroom.
I'm going to start by breaking down the beginning of the day, and I'll remind you of what the defendant said when she testified yesterday. She said that when Joey woke up, he went to work, but he did so on no sleep. Didn't have his meds for 72 hours. And throughout this, I'm going to remind you that the defendant has every reason to make it look like Joey was just about to go out of his mind.
Hey, buddy. What are you supposed to say? You saw him at night? Hey, no.
What are we supposed to say? Not, he did this to himself. Like, let's get help. What are we supposed to say? Not the truth. What are we going to make up to cover this up? That he fell on a knife? The defendant is coming up with other explanations. She's trying to come up with lies to cover this up. There's so many reasons this is not a suicide. There's so many. Defendant's changing stories. She tells John not to call. Her statements. What are we supposed to say? He fell on a knife. Her saying she has to leave. We're going to get to what she did after that, but she drove herself from the scene in her own car. And she's threatened to stab him before. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no way this is a suicide.
A lot of this case has been innuendo, suspicion, and a lot of conjecture, speculation. But the overarching issue here that really hasn't been addressed is how, why, and for what reason would Samantha kill Joey? This was a chaotic situation, for sure. And Joey was really, for lack of a better term, going into a downward spiral throughout this process. We know that he was acting crazy at a hotel and saying weird things that didn't make any sense. He was deteriorating mentally. He was using more drugs. He got fired from his job. I'll tell you right now, here's how it should be impossible to find Samantha Krebs guilty of this offense. And it comes from the state's own witness, Dr. Kelly. This is the single most important fact in this case. When he took the stand, this is a man who is a forensic pathologist. He does autopsies. He's been doing it for decades. He's the deputy chief examiner, medical examiner for Milwaukee County. He was asked, and he testified, that it is reasonably possible that this was a self-inflicted wound. His testimony has established reasonable doubt in this case.
In the matter of the state of Wisconsin plaintiff versus defendant Samantha Jean Krebs, Outagamie County case 2024 CF 921, the jury finds as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant Samantha Krebs guilty of the first-degree intentional homicide as charged in count 1 of the information.
Guilty as charged. Ali Benevento. It's a case, she told her story. Jury didn't buy it. It took them 5.5 hours. So they did what they're supposed to do inside the jury room. But at the end of the day, self-inflicted stab wounds, it's a tough sell.
Yeah, absolutely, especially when you hear that on that recording, when it looks like she's trying to get her story straight from the beginning. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to get her story straight throughout this entire process. I'm not sure that taking the stand in her own defense was a wise choice. And in the end, I think the jury found her to be not credible.
Yeah, I love when defendants take the stand, Carmen. You know, I think a jury, we give them the job of seeking the truth. So the more they know, the better off they are in trying to figure out what the truth is, right? So we should have defendants take the stand in every case so we can get to the truth.
Well, that's not exactly the goal for the defense side anyway. But in this case, I think she had to.
Wait, let's just make the... Nima, you heard that, right, Nima? The goal of the defense is not to get to the truth. Okay, continue, Carmen. I'm sorry.
It's to hold the prosecution to their burden. They're the one who brought this case. And in this particular case, I think she had to take the stand. She had this fantastic story she wanted to tell. She had her moment in the sun, and the jury spoke. But I think that drug addicts, which this clearly was a drug-fueled event, are commonly liars and self-involved, and I think she demonstrated that on the stand, and I think she's very unaware of how she was coming across, but that's exactly what I read in the room, and I wasn't surprised about it at all.
Yeah. Nima, we're in a world now that I've noticed, it seems like it's more difficult for prosecutors these days. There's much more skepticism, I think, in the jury pool at large. Skeptics of whether it's the government, the prosecution, investigators. We saw that play out to the extreme in the Karen Reed case. But I think generally, and I think that's healthy, and I think that keeps prosecutors honest and makes prosecutors try the case the way they need to try the case.
Yeah, Vinny, but this wasn't one of those cases. People have lied, but they haven't lied like Samantha Krebs lied. I mean, this was outrageous. First, she wasn't there. Then her boyfriend fell on the knife. Then it was suicide. I mean, who kills themselves by stabbing themselves in the chest? And of course, the knife's not even there. It's in the sink. She's telling witnesses to lie. She has her playbook all written out. The only surprise in this case, Vinny, was that it took 5 hours and not 5 minutes to convict her. I mean, she was a terrible witness, unlikable, not credible, and really the defense. I mean, look, God bless criminal defense lawyers. They have to do their job, but there was really nothing they could do with this case. So it was just a guilty verdict waiting to happen.
Yeah, but I like when they take their time. I don't want them rushing through it. I don't want anyone to think that the system is fixed, that they're going to go through the evidence. You have a trial that has, 6 days of arguments and testimony. You take 5.5 hours. That's about the right time, I think, personally. Ali, where are you on the system where we are now? Do you agree that there's a little more, like it didn't apply here, but just generally, do you think there's a little more skepticism now? Because we're hearing those two words put together more often these days than we have in the past at Court TV, and Carmen's smiling about it. Those words are not guilty. Like we've seen more of that. Do you think we are in a place now where prosecutors are going to have to do an even better job?
Well, prosecutors should always be doing a good job. They need to meet their burden. And if they can't, then the right outcome is that 2-word verdict. And I think that it is a combination of things. I think with social media and having cameras everywhere, that the public is even more in tune to things like police misconduct or prosecutors cutting corners. And they're frankly getting sick of it. So yes, while it might seem like we're seeing more of this, I think that people are paying closer attention to what the prosecution's burden is. And when they don't meet that burden, or when they try to cut corners in an effort to take away somebody's freedom, then I think juries are paying attention to that. And if that is the case, that is the right outcome.
Oh, and I agree. You got to do our jobs, right? Nima, you had to do your job when you were a federal prosecutor. When I was a lowly state prosecutor, had to do my job, had to meet my burden. All right, Carmen, you have a client like this. What is this moment like when they're found guilty? I know you may not have had this situation. I'm presuming that you may have had one guilty verdict in a trial that you tried. But what is it like, and how do you deal with the client that is now facing the rest of their life behind bars?
You know, Vinny, every client's a little bit different. I don't know if she believed that this jury was actually going to find her not guilty, or if she had some understanding that the likelihood of her being found guilty was high. In my experience, when you see how things are going in trial, you start letting the client know, you start creating expectations, but some clients are never going to get there. And those are the ones who describe it as somebody punching them in the gut. I mean, it's just, it's emotional overload. So.
We are out of time. I hear the music. Carmen Rowe, Nima Romani, Ali Benevento, thank you all so much. When we come back, I'll reveal something else you need to know tonight.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look. Another juror speaking out in the Donna Adelson trial. Let's take a listen.
When we got in there, we first started by laying out and going just count by count, starting with count 1 of first-degree murder, and then going around and seeing how everyone felt about where we're currently standing on just this specific one and not overarching. And everyone, at that point in time, I felt pretty comfortable. I was leaning towards a guilty verdict. And there were a few people on the jury that weren't so sure, especially after going through the jury instructions, because you have to be very specific in the way that you go about coming to your verdict. Finding intent before the murder was being committed was one thing that a few people were hung up on, because when you're looking at the broad scope of all the evidence, so little of it comes pre-murder. It's really at the next years after the fact where most of the evidence against her was collected.
And was there sort of standout evidence for you that made you go, she's guilty?
For me, the bump operation was a big part of that, and the code. Innocent people don't speak in code, and that was what really was pushing me towards a guilty verdict. Her, as well as when the operation happened and she was handed that sheet of paper, just taking the paper and putting it straight into her bag without looking at it. I'm not taking anything from anyone and putting it in my bag before looking at it.
And I was going to say that I think that bump operation for a lot of people really solidified it. Was there any witness testimony that sort of sold it for you or that sticks out in your mind when you think back to it?
Rob was a big state of character, I felt like, because he's got so much insight to her as a person that we don't get to see. Because I'm not supposed to use any of my impression of her being on the bench there. So I did my best not to pay any attention to her and just base my thoughts on her based off of the testimony and evidence presented.
What a smart, impressive young man doing his civic duty, and wow, really interesting and insightful. All right, folks, take a look at your television screens. We have a missing child who needs your help. This is Destiny Jackson, missing since September 3rd out of Moscow, Idaho. If you see Destiny, pick up the phone, make a call, make a difference, 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the Moscow Police Department out in Idaho. That number's on your screen. Let's see if we can get Destiny to a safe place tonight. Don't go anywhere. We have another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.